The Army's subcompact weapon. The United States military at this point, along with the Army, the Air Force, all those guys, have selected this as a personal defense weapon. This is the B&T APC9K. Now, there have been a lot of subguns that have been used by the United States military over a long period of time. Anything from the MP5, MP5K, MP7, P90s, lots of different weapons. We're going to be talking about the adoption of this weapon, why it was adopted, how it does direct comparisons to other weapons within its price point, and we're going to talk about this thing ad nauseum because I think it's really interesting. You really don't see a lot talked about when it comes to subcompact weapons, but it's still a very viable weapon to have. I know personal detection detail is something that probably you're a little bit more familiar with than I am, John.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that this is the first SMG that the Army's adopted in how long? I think the last one was the grease gun, or maybe the MP5 for soft.
It's been a hot minute, that's for sure. And in fact, I'm kind of surprised that they went with a 9mm versus, all the different options that they have. But really interesting. Let's talk about it. Let's get on the range. Let's shoot it. Let's see how it performs. Now, before we get into that, we of course have to talk about the biggest sponsor of the channel. The biggest sponsor of the channel is Primary Arms. You're looking for pistol optics, looking for compact optics. You know what? We're not going to say where to go, but we're going to say we love Primary Arms a million. Don't we, Sawyer?
Oh, dude, Primary Arms is the best.
And you know what? This month right now is Cinnabon July. And if you say, I love Cinnabon 3 times and you email to them, we don't know what will happen.
They'll send a bomb to your house.
Guys, if you're looking to be a more American, we of course have to recommend Henry Repeating Arms. Lever actions, revolvers, they are what makes America America. Go and check them out, give them a ton of love. And if you go to henrythumb.com, we can't really say what it is, but we can say there's a nice little surprise for you. So go and check them out. If you want to become a better shooter, we recommend Dry Fire. Mantis will turn your weapon into a dry fire machine. Finally, all ammunition is provided for by AAC. Final note will be, if you're looking to get a B&T, this particular one was sent to us by Axe Arms. They are who we recommend. They've sent us a few B&T products. But we should note that B&T, we do have a relationship with B&T. We do know their engineers. We know a lot of the employees over there. And we have done weapons that they have sent us. Not this particular one, but it should be noted for our full disclosure. All that being said, we don't have a dog in the fight. We have nothing to do with the Army procurement process. And we're just interested in the history and the future history of military firearms. So let's talk about the APC9K. You're now on the range. We got John loading up a couple different guns here. So we have the APC9K because it has been adopted, but there were a lot of options when it came to submachine guns for the United States military. So right here we have several other flavors that we'll be testing directly against the APC9K, and we'll see how the performance fares between them, because we have heavy hitters like the MP5K, the MPX. There's a lot of options. But before we do that, let's see what the base performance of the APC9K is, and then we'll get into those comparisons. John, are you so excited?
Super excited.
Look at him, he's smiling. He just shoots guns. So we're gonna do build drill, 7 yards, 6 rounds, A zone, and we'll see how this goes.
Stand by. 145.
Nice. Nice and clean right there. Ooh, right on those shots, so well within A zone. Feels good. John, you ready? Nice. 155. Good shooting, John. How'd that trigger feel to you?
It's honestly not bad. I mean, it's no Geisley, but this is the stock one, right?
Correct. Pretty good for what it is. So one thing we should talk about is when you bring this up in your shoulder, and John can speak to this too, but this stock, because you're so far back on it, it's so thin, you actually have a little bit of flexion in that. So when you bring it up, you have a tendency to kind of flex it in your shoulder a little bit. It's not the best, but being a personal defense weapon, I understand having a really thin stock, but it does kind of feel like a step in the wrong direction compared to something like, the MP5A3 stock, which is far more kind of stable in the shoulder. But we'll go ahead, we're gonna shoot a quick Mozambique with this, a few long shots, and then let's do the comparison. Mozambique for the Dark Continent, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head.
Stand by. 091.
Nice. Cool. We got 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. John, you have nothing there?
Let me get a new bag.
Well, I happen to have one in my Onward Research Assaulter's Placard, which actually can hold 2, just like the good old SMG days. Never mind. All right, shooter, are you ready? Stand by. Beautiful. 103. Got the little micro mag in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good shot, John. You can see we got the little 20 rounder in there. Look how cute that little guy is. Now, if you notice on most of our mags here, we have the bumper plate. The mags are a teeny bit fragile. They're not bad. Different polymers have different types of things that they're good at. Clear polymers are just a little bit more fragile, but you can see the rounds. So these bumpers just prevent a lot of these mags from cracking. If you don't have the bumpers, tape on some foam. You don't need to go too hard on it. The military ones do use a different polymer that is darker and is stronger. You can also get KCI mags that have enhanced metal feed lips. But personally, with the bumpers on the B&Ts, I've never had a trouble with them, as a quick note.
Let's go do some long shooting, and then we'll do some comparisons.
We do have about a standard pistol barrel length on this guy. You have about a 4.4 inch barrel with a little bit and change. And because of that, you know, you're getting the same velocity as you get from a full-size handgun. Now, with that being said, because you have much better stability with the stock, all that kind of stuff, it's far easier to make shots. So we're at 120 right here. We'll take a few shots. So it really isn't that bad. You can make very far shots with this. It's just LOL 9mm. You don't get an incredible terminal performance, but it's much better than just shooting like, you know, a standard handgun, unless you're like Ben Stoker or somebody incredible on a handgun. Now, very interestingly, the APC9K is a direct blowback weapon with a hydraulic buffer. Direct blowback is surprising because on many submachine guns that have been made recently, or even not recently, the MP5K is a roller delayed weapon. The MPX is a piston driven weapon. These shoot very soft. Now, a direct blowback traditionally has a lot more recoil. The B&T APC9K does have a hydraulic buffer that's really supposed to take a lot of the kick out of it. I've just been shooting this today, so it's kind of hard to say if it recoils more than less than these other guns. So let's do a direct comparison. The first thing we have to note with this is going to be price. It's expensive. It's 2.2K. That's a lot for a pistol caliber carbine, a submachine gun, whatever you might call it. So we have guns that kind of are at the same level. So we have an MP5K from H&K. We have the MPX. These two weapons come in at roughly the same price point or slightly above, depending on the model. And then right here we have a CZ Scorpion. This is another option that comes in at a much cheaper price point. This thing's $1,000 to $1,200, and it is a direct blowback weapon, but it does not have the hydraulic buffer like the APC9K. Let's do a direct recoil comparison and go from there. Now, there's a battle going on that most of you don't even notice. It's not weapons or uniform. It's about way more than that. It's about control of your time, of your future, your choices, everything. Now, this video is sponsored by PDS Debt. Let's go ahead and let's talk about it. So one of the biggest tools used to take control of you, that is going to be debt. Yeah, not just a little, we're talking a lot. Credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, all that stuff that just weighs your mind down. And you know what? When you have a lot of that stack up, it feels terrible. You feel like there's no way out. But in reality, there actually is. That's where PDS Debt comes in. So what they can do is they're not some cookie cutter solution. They're actually going to tailor make a solution specific to you based off of your financial needs. They build a plan around your life, and there's no credit score limit or anything like that. They are just going to help you. Now, they've helped hundreds of thousands of people already, and these aren't just empty promises or anything like that. They have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. They have tons of 5-star ratings on Google as well as on Trustpilot. People trust them because, quite frankly, they've earned it. So if you're just drowning in credit card debt, personal loans, medical bills, whatever you might have, don't just survive, guys, take action. You're actually 30 seconds away from getting a free assessment. And you know what? The sky's gonna look much brighter. So go check them out, pdsdebt.com/GT. Thank you so much to them for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to the APC9K. First things first, let's check the recoil on the APC9K. Very smooth. It feels very good to shoot, but I've just been shooting this all day. Let's do a comparison to the king of SMGs, and that is the MP5K. Now, the MP5 is legendary. The K has a little bit more jump, but this does have a very similar barrel length to the APC9K. Let's test them directly. Okay, the MP5K definitely has a lot less recoil than the APC9K. Well, not a lot less, but it's very, very noticeable. Next up, SIG Scorpion. This is probably the simplest mechanism, direct blowback. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. That has the most recoil of any of the guns that I've shot today. It is what it is. It's a Scorpion. Okay, next up is going to be the MPX, and then we'll have John try all of these. Okay, by far the least amount of recoil of all of those. So, before we talk about that, let's get John on these. Let's hear his opinion, and let's go from there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's definitely the MPX. Not that the MP5 or the B&T are that far behind, but I would say this wins.
That's very true. Let's take a moment to talk about this. So when it comes to the MP5s, especially like the MP5K, MP5, these famously had a lot of trouble in maritime environments. A lot of improvements were made to the MP5 system, but eventually, to make them super reliable, H&K did make the UMP, which is a direct blowback weapon. And although it recoils way harder, it was much more robust in terms of both maritime and in terms of reliability. Not that the MP5 is an unreliable weapon, but the thing you have to understand is that with a pistol caliber carbine, they're firing 9mm. There's not a whole lot of force, power, anything behind those. So the more you kill the recoil on these with different kind of exotic operating mechanisms, the closer you get to possible failure. The MPX, being a short stroke piston, is very, very soft. However, it's not well known to be an incredibly reliable weapon. Not to say it's unreliable, but rather to say that compared to, say, a direct blowback, it does suffer more stoppages and failures. So that brings us to the APC9K and the Scorpion. When the Army was evaluating both of these, what was kind of decided upon was to get as reliable a weapon as possible. By doing a direct blowback with a hydraulic system, you kind of get not the best of both worlds, because there's a little bit of parts that are going on with the hydraulic buffer that could lead to failures. But essentially, with a direct blowback system, you have less parts to fail, and that's what the Army was really looking for. So the APC9K, in terms of recoil, sits about third place of the guns we've shot today. The MPX being the softest, the MP5K being the next softest, then the APC9K, and finally the Scorpion. That being said, the Scorpion will run through literally any type of environment you put it through. The MPX right here is a full size, so going to a smaller one, you're going to have a little bit more recoil. Just like if we went to a full size MP5, we're going to have even less recoil than the K. So it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison, but we wanted to show you some of the different options that we have out there. Overall, I will say that the APC9K isn't really that far off from the MP5K. It's very pleasant to shoot. John?
I'd just say that to me, the B&T it's like a slightly different flavor of MPX to me. I mean, I get that it's different operating mechanisms. Some people might, get mad at that, but
sure.
It is very high quality. It's just expensive. If you're just starting out into this stuff and you want a PCC, me personally, I wouldn't get that.
Yeah,
but if you got it for free, you would have a very, very good PCC.
Or if you're issued it.
Yeah, true.
If you're issued it, it's not a bad weapon at all. It's just, if we're talking in civilian terms, like John is saying, that's a lot of cash to put down on it.
It is a lot.
It's like I could get a really nice Geisley Super Duty plus an optic. Probably a much more effective weapon.
Yeah, it's great. It's just expensive. So,
well, we're kind of talking trash on it, but let's test its performance even more and see where we're at. Okay, so we do have ambidextrous controls right here. So we have our magazine release on both sides. We also have a bolt release on both sides. So let's talk about what different types of reloads are going to look like. So once we're at bolt lock right there, and we do have bolt lock on these guys, of course, eject the mag. Mags fall free. Once we have our new one, there's 2 different methods or 3 different methods for reloading it. So we can either hit it same side with our trigger finger right here. It's a little bit stiff. It does break in over time. We can hit it just like an AR-15 once it's in, or we can also rack the bolt to the rear by releasing it just like we would on some type of side charger. Now on the APC9K, the charging handle does fold to the front, so it's nice and out of the way, and I love that. So that is your basic reload. Let's go ahead and see that at speed. Easy. Pretty easy. So we've done a lot of shooting with the APC9K. Let's go and do some talking. We're going to go ahead and break this down as autistic as possible, get in the black screen room and talk about the history, the selection process from the Army, and how this gun came to fruition. We've done a lot of shooting. We're going to do a lot of talking now as we break down the APC9K in full autism spectrum mode and talk about what makes it great. Now, we kind of previously talked a little bit about my associations, how we got our hands on this weapon, but we've had a few more things that have happened since. So I did just get off a call with the president of B&T USA to go over some of the more interesting facts that came to the procurement process of the APC9K. Unfortunately, a lot of this information wasn't exactly public record, but he was more than happy to share it with you guys in terms of understanding, so that we could understand better how this weapon was procured and why it was procured. Now, I don't consider this to be that big of a deal in terms of swaying my opinions on the APC9K, rather because this was the Army procurement and the Army is going to do Army stuff at all times. That being said, let's go ahead, let's delve into it. So the APC9K is a very interesting firearms because it made some really interesting design choices. So rather than being a direct blowback, which I've talked about previously, you could say it's direct blowback, but perhaps more fitting would be hydraulic assisted direct blowback. That is, there is a fairly stout hydraulic buffer. B&T is fairly known for the hydraulic buffers to help kill the recoil on their weapons. That helps the weapon function. So while direct blowback is correct, it's probably not the most correct answer. It's like a multiple choice, and I'm probably going to get it wrong once again. We have that. Let's go ahead. Let's continue talking about it. So the APC9K does feed from 30 or 20 round mags. Right here, we have a 30 round mag in there. We'll talk more about magazines, but before we kind of get into a lot of the autistic engineering details, let's talk a little bit about the adoption of the APC9K, because I think that's very compelling. If you're unfamiliar with the adoption of submachine guns by the United States military, you're probably not alone in that. That's because the military really hasn't adopted a whole lot of submachine guns, rather than ones that were used outside of normal Army procurement channels, say within SOCOM and special operations. Within the Army and the military at large, the MP5K has long been the kind of personal defense weapon that you've seen among personal security details or security forces of some type. Now, when the tender was put out by the Army in 2017 for a submachine gun, they had a lot of very odd requirements. Originally, they wanted the magazine to insert through the grip, like say something like a TP9 or MP9. So this is what that would look like. Right here we have a B&T TP9, as you can see, the magazine inserts through the grip. So originally, when they submitted for it, they did submit with the MP9. The Army, being the Army, did change their procurement details to have a magazine that was forward of the grip, that was kind of following a lot of the trends, and that was a lot more similar to what they had previously gone away from, which is the MP5K. Now, probably one of the most interesting parts about the procurement is there's a lot of different ways that the military can procure different firearms. A lot of those come down to cost, but there is a way that they can procure firearms that negates that and does not focus on cost, but rather focuses on what the soldier needs, the airman needs, and those focus primarily on performance, reliability, parts interchangeability, etc., with price being one of the last factors. And I think that's what makes this compelling, because that's what it fell under. Now, a lot of participants submitted for the Army submachine gun program, but ultimately it was down selected to 6 main companies. Now, the companies that ended up submitting submachine guns were Global Ordnance, Ankset Arms, Shield Arms, SIG Sauer, of course, Trident Rifles, and B&T. Now, many more submitted, but they didn't all get down selected to the final part of the procedure. So with those weapons, they were put into the hands of soldiers as well as reliability and durability tested. Now, before we talk about that, kind of the thing you fail to understand about a lot of military procurement is the military, of course, wants a well-functioning firearm, but far beyond that, what's going to be very important is, can you make enough? A lot of companies can make really great firearms, but how many of these companies can deliver on time? So one of the first things that the military did was put a very short timeline in most companies to ensure that they would see if these companies could actually make these firearms in short order and if they could actually deliver the amount that the Army needed. Now, from there, in the trial itself, one of the first things they did is they disassembled all of the weapons and they mixed and matched the parts and put them back together. Apparently SIG Sauer was quickly eliminated based on this factor alone, as were several others. B&T excelled. This is how B&T typically builds their guns, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And we'll talk more about that later, but it comes down to extremely precise QC on part of B&T that helped them accomplish that. So from there, these weapons were all put through an 18,000 round torture test. Well, not torture test, but reliability test. Now, of those, the B&T APC9K encountered 2 malfunctions that were of the Type 1 variety. Type 1 meaning it required one action to clear it. Think of something like a stovepipe or a failure to extract, where all you have to do is pull back on the charging handle or just slap that piece of brass out of the chamber. So overall, it performed extremely well. In fact, in terms of performance, the B&T APC9K was #1 out of the 6 contestants that got to the end. Now, the APC9K was also last place in terms of cost because it was the most expensive firearm, coming in at around $2,200. Now, there's no way to dance around that. That is an expensive weapon, and I do chuckle at the findings, which is best performance, but worst cost. That's just the way it is. We're not going to dance around that subject. So these guns are made to last for a long time. So one thing that we can point out that we can't exactly name who it was, but some B&T submachine guns, the APC9Ks, were being sold to an unknown country entity that we can't talk about. The concern on selling these weapons was they wouldn't really be able to sell anything to them after this for about 10 to 20 years, simply because these weapons are known for having insane longevity that suit the barrel, the parts, and many other factors that we'll get into. And that's kind of what B&T is trying to get at. They want to make a weapon that can last for a long time. And maybe this sounds like I'm kind of preaching their talking points, but in everything that I've seen from B&T submachine guns, whether it be the APC, APC9Ks, GHM9s, KH9SDs, they all last for an extremely long period of time. There's a lot of thought processes that go into it. And more accurately, because they use a very simple operating principle, there are less parts to go wrong. We all understand that an MP5K, an MP5 with a roller delayed system is extremely reliable, will last for a long time. However, advances in material science, advances in barrel science, and understanding how these weapons works allows us to get an APC9K with a much more reliable system, being direct blowback, and still being able to kill the recoil on that to get it pretty close to the MP5K, which is saying a lot. We've kind of said a lot about the procurement, and kind of the base thing that we want to talk about at the end is that the weapon performed exceptionally well. The weapon is durable, the weapon is reliable. And what's great about military procurement is that the military is able to test these weapons to an nth degree that many YouTubers can't test it to. I can't exactly take, well, I could, but it's gonna bankrupt me for one video. I can't take, 6 different submachine guns and put a total of, nearly 100K rounds through each of them to do reliability testing. But the Army can do that, and that is something that we can look at in order to get a baseline for how these weapons perform. It should be noted, like we said before, but this wasn't just an off-the-shelf purchase. This was a formal adoption of this weapon for use by Army security details, personal security details, Air Force security forces, and beyond there, the Secret Service also bought some, as well as Border Patrol and several other agencies that were kind of following what the military was doing. Now, we've talked a lot about that procurement. Let's move on to the weapon itself and talk about what makes it so interesting. So, being a direct blowback system, the weapon does weigh more than what you typically expect. A lot of specs put this gun at a little over 5 pounds. However, with the stock, with everything kind of on it, you're about closer to 6.7 pounds. A lot of people have noted this to be a negative virtue for the APC9K. However, when it comes to a submachine gun, I don't consider 6.7 pounds to be bad at all. For people complaining about 6 pounds, I feel like I'm kind of maybe belaboring the point a little bit, but it's not much. Go to the gym, work out. 6.7 not only is quite light, but in addition to that, really does help kill recoil. The direct blowback mechanism means that we are relying on a combination of the weight of the bolt as well as the recoil spring to ensure that the action is able to resist the force of that 9mm round detonating, as well as controlling it. The hydraulic buffer helps take a lot of that sting out of that bolt as it hits the very rear of the receiver, and it does a very good job of that. Now, the barrels are typically 4.3 inches. However, with the tri-lug adapter on there, it's about closer to 5 inches, a little bit over that. although I'm remiss to say that's extremely effective extension of the barrel, but it is very easy to mount. Right here we do have an SQD suppressor, which those are awesome, but in general what I would recommend would be the RQD rather than the SQD that we have right here. We just had a few problems with these. Just go with the other one. Now, another note about the APC9K is it's been known to have very low gas blowback while suppressed. Whether you use a high flow suppressor or a low flow suppressor, it's as good at that. This is due to close tolerances and QC tolerances when it comes to the weapon. There wasn't anything specific from talking to engineers at B&T that led to this specifically, other than really good QC. So I have to give it to them for that. It is a very compact, very low blowback weapon with great recoil. Now, we do have to talk about the barrels. The barrels last an extremely long time. The barrels are cold hammer forged, and we can't exactly say who the material is coming from, other than to say that many other very legendary companies that also use cold hammer forged barrels are using the same barrel steel. Being 9mm low pressure as they are, these barrels have been known to last well over 100K rounds. If you're shooting 100K on an APC9K and you burn out that barrel, well, God bless you. That's pretty incredible performance. And just like many other legendary weapons like the MP5, MP5K, these barrels don't burst when under high pressures. So there's a very famous picture that will pop up here of a APC9K from a certain foreign user where they had a squib round, which means that the slug doesn't exit the barrel. After that, the user shot another 12 rounds into that squib round, so all that lead just piled up behind it. Typically, this will blow a barrel. In the terms of extremely good barrel steel like we have here and many other weapons, it merely bulged it. This is incredible performance and also increases the safety of the end user. There's a lot of testing that goes into these, and the price certainly reflects it. You're not going to see that with most other cheaper SMGs. This isn't to boo-hoo those choices, rather than to say that this isn't just like a random cost that was inserted and sent over to you. There's a lot of testing and a lot of engineering that does go into these weapons to ensure that they can meet those very high standards. Now, on the sides right here, we have M-LOK slots. Right here, we have Picatinny mounted. We have a Surefire Scout. And on the grip itself, I have just a simple tape switch down there. So boop, boop, you're gonna die. And that works absolutely well. The charging handle is one of my favorite parts because the charging handle folds forward and out of the way. Makes it harder for it to catch on stuff. I love it. In addition to that, this is a non-reciprocating charging handle. So you can watch in shooting footage, which we'll put up here. Yes, you can see it reciprocating, but the charging handle will not. That is absolutely wonderful. And then in addition to that, just like the good old Swiss are known for, we have their cool little logo right there. It's very nicely machined and very nicely finished. And in the tender for this particular weapon, they asked for non-reflective black, and that's precise what we have here, and it looks very good. Now on the lower, the first thing that you're gonna notice on the lower is ambidextrous. So we have a right-handed release, we have our left-handed mag release. We also have two different bolt releases on both sides, whichever one you want to use. Now, the lower on these are not serialized. That means you can swap out the lower to whatever you want, whether you want to use Glock mags or SIG mags or even MP5 mags. They have a lower that will do it for you. I prefer to use just the typical MP9 APC9 magazines because I like them quite a bit, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But should your department, should your country, or whoever require a different magazine, there is an adapter that allows those to be used. Now, it should be noted if you have an adapter that uses an MP5 mag, just like MP5s, it will not lock back on those. Compared to many other magazines, such as the typical magazines, it will lock back on an empty magazine, which is nice for reload, just makes life a little bit simpler. We're gonna move down to the magazine and talk about these for a moment, because I think this is a very interesting point when it comes to the, I guess you could say, B&T kind of lineup of firearms, because they have a lot of different guns that use this mag. A couple different magazines that we have right here. We have our typical MP9 mags that you know and love. Translucent, slightly gray, slightly blue. This is a 20 round, there's 15 rounders, and we have the typical 30 rounder used right here. So a couple notes about these. There's some odd kind of little quirks to them. So if you are shooting at an indoor range, shooting an outdoor range, and you have a concrete floor and you don't have these nice little base pads right here, it can crack the mag, especially on a full magazine. So if there's one thing that I would say, it's get the bumper plates, or if you don't have the bumper plates, take a little bit of foam, tape it to the bottom, just to ensure it kind of dampens that impact. A lot of people have noted these magazines as breaking. Well, not a lot of people, but you certainly see the the talk online. Personally, I've been running an MP9, GHM9, KH9 for a long time, and I've never had one of these magazines break on me. That's not to say that I don't believe those, just to point out that there's always kind of two stories to everything. But with the base pads on here, you're going to have less chance of breaking these, so that's definitely what I recommend. Now, beyond that, there's two other magazines that we want to talk about: the military contract mags and the KCI mags. Right here we have a KCI mag. They have added a metal feed lip at the top right here for increased strength. I haven't really noticed a big difference between the two in terms of durability and reliability. In fact, they've been about the same for me. Now, the US military, they use a different polymer on their magazines. If you know anything about polymer or making polymer magazines, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. The military magazines look kind of a darker, less clear color. And the reason for that was ultimately petroleum-based products. Because of the amount of different chemicals that you'd run into, the military wanted to use something that was more resistant to petroleum, which is why they ended up going with that different magazine makeup. Some people believe it's due to like a massive increase in strength, but this isn't specifically the reason, or it's not specifically noted that that is the case. So that brings us to the end of the magazines right there. And like we talked about before, once you fire the last round, bolt locks back, simply insert, hit that bolt release, and you are nice and loaded up. And we can then go ahead and, whew, that one launched out. We can go ahead and launch around through our ceiling right there. With all that being said, let's talk about the trigger. Safety is very easy to actuate. It is ambi, and I like the safety quite a bit, but more importantly, how is the trigger? The trigger is noted to be just about 4.5 or so. So let's try that out. Put your finger out of mine, a little Unchained Melody. We have a little bit of play, about 3 millimeters, about a 4-pound let off, 2-stage trigger. From the reset, right there. A little mushy right there on the reset. Overall, a fairly good trigger, and I've been very happy with the trigger. And as you can see from the shooting, it's been pretty quick to use. Moving back from there, we do have the stock. So the stock is meant for getting this weapon as compact as possible. So let's go ahead and close that up for you. Once this thing is closed up, this is well under 15 inches, which is what the Army requirement is. This is very compact. It can also fire. There's nothing preventing it from firing, so you can shoot it, you know, under the arm, sideways, be as cool as you want. But when you're ready, there's no release. You simply pull it back and it locks where it is, and then the release to collapse that is just right there. So again, once you're ready to rock, just go ahead and pull that right out and you're good to go. There is a little bit of play right there compared to like your typical MP5 stocks, but it's nothing that's crazy. This was meant to be as light and as small as a form factor as possible, which is what they're going for, and they did a good job. There's many ways to go about a stock, and depends on what you want. Being a personal protection weapon, this is meant for ripping it out, getting a couple mags out, getting the very important person to where they need to be, and getting out of there. So you have to understand the use case scenario. In addition to that, the stock can be easily changed to whatever you might need. At the rear here, we have our nice little hooks for adding a single point sling. I'm not running a sling for this. We have it kind of set up for PSD and everything, but single point is probably going to be what you want to go with something this small. And on the top here, we do have an older EOTech 512. I like it because I think it looks cool as hell on here. You have fold-up sights that come with the gun, and they are excellent. I have no qualms about that. Overall, we have a very good firearm. I didn't think I was going to like the APC9K nearly as much as I do, but it's a very soft recoiling, extremely reliable weapon that is easily field repaired with any parts that you might need. So I like it quite a bit. And if there's one thing that I could say, it would be, if you got the budget and you're really looking for something that's very compact, I think you'd be hard pressed to find something that has the performance capabilities that you see from the APC9K. So get out there and try it out. The biggest thing is going to be, of course, cost. We've showed you some of the lower cost options, whether it be a CZ Scorpion and stuff, and those will get you really close in terms of performance. Once you hit about that 1200 mark, you're not necessarily getting those massive increases in performance as you spend more money, but certainly it is a better firearm than those more moderately priced. It just depends on what you need. Is it worth it? That's going to be something that you're going to have to find out, to paraphrase the late and great Paul Harrell. So guys, get out there, try it out. Here's the thing, get trained. If you're not trained on this, if you don't train with this little guy, it's not gonna matter. You're still gonna suck with it and you're gonna die. So train with it, get good with it. This is a wonderful firearm and it's going to fit into a large tool bags of different tools for different scenarios. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out the Patreon, all the worst clips possible of me and John will critique your deadlifting form. It won't be a good critique, but it will be a critique nonetheless. All right, guys, take care. Final thing for you guys could be a little bit of dad advice. Dad advice for today. You know what? The people who tell you not to eat a bunch of eggs look fat, and the people who tell you to eat a bunch of eggs look jacked as fuck. So we're gonna say eat a bunch of eggs.